Hello and welcome to another episode of our From the Helm series as part of our partnership with Bell Direct, Bell Financial Group and the ASX Mid-Caps Conference. I'm Grady Wulff, Market Analyst with Bell Direct, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Rob Williamson, the Managing Director and CEO of Alpha HPA, which is an exciting story and time with the company creating ultra-high purity aluminium products.
That's it.
To tell us more, Rob, take it away.
Yeah, so we thank you, Grady. We produce these high purity aluminium materials and products that are dominantly in the semiconductor sector, lithium-ion battery sector for EVs, and now we're sort of also cracking into the direct lithium extraction sector as well. And there's also some other sort of specialty ceramics and other areas around that, but particularly focused on that semiconductor and EV sort of future-facing technologies sector.
Yeah. Now tell us about the mining process and producing ultra high purity aluminium products. There's not much known out there for our investors who are not familiar with the industry.
So I'll allow one strike if you use the word mining.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Because no, I'm just staring. It's fine. So we are not a mining business, and we are a specialty chemicals company and a manufacturing business really. So we are using, shall we say, some hydrometallurgical processes which sort of come from metals refining in our technology, but we have a special technology and a trade secreted IP that allows us to make very special products that are outperforming in those sectors that I mentioned earlier around the semiconductor market and the lithium-ion battery market.
Rob, offtake agreements are really important, and especially in the semiconductor industry. Can you tell us where you're at with some key letters of intent that you've got? Yeah,
so I think from our point of view, we work with our customers to build out a qualification process. It's a very technical process, and so they've spent $1 million potentially in qualifying us, and then we get to a point where we have that technical qualification. We've then worked into a letter of intent for most recently 4,000 tonnes. In total we have about 5,100 tonnes of allocated or of letters of intent, if you will, for the semiconductor sector itself.
Yeah.
And that is all servicing two main areas. One is what's called the thermal interface packaging, which is like the little black-grey heat sink that you see on top of a microchip. So you're all sort of familiar with that.
Yeah.
And our material outperforms everybody else in the sector, particularly for these high-end AI chips and so on. And there's a unique element to our IP that is enabling that nobody else can do in the world. And then the other piece is around what's called, apologies for the technical jargon here, but it's called CMP polishing, which is all around polishing the substrate, the wafer substrate that those high power semis use to deliver high power semiconductors into the energy transition and to the AIs as well. So.
Now, speaking of that energy transition, there's increasing demand for the ultra high purity aluminium products that you are developing. How does this expansion how does this bode for expansion of your products you're outputting?
Yeah, so there's a few areas. Obviously, when you talk about energy transition, it's anything from EVs to solar,
to
wind,
really,
all that sort of stuff. And so the power semi market, which is really microchips that are designed to control high power inputs, so which is in a battery pack on an EV, but it's also for switching solar panels and DC switches and all that stuff. That market is growing significantly because of the demand for all that kind of technology. And so the CMP polishing on silicon carbide substrates is a big area that we're focused on with our material, and our material is 50% more effective at doing that work in that environment, and that again comes back to our unique selling point in our IP that does that.
Yeah.
And then the same thing on the thermal interface packaging, like I mentioned earlier, for those high frequency, high computational chips that are actually the AI that is being used to accelerate the development of those technologies is a demand pull on these dissipation of heat, right? That is created when you're running millions of calculations a second.
Yeah.
And our material has no what's called alpha radiation that affects the performance of the chip.
Which we've seen elsewhere needing so much water for cooling, right?
Yeah, and so that's the other side of it, is that so we don't affect the performance of the chip, and we increase their cooling by 25 times. So we save energy for these AI data centers and so on.
Yeah,
and so I can tell you, having been to them, they are huge
and they're hot.
Users of power. They are very, very hot.
I was going to say they need so much water to cool them down. So the fact that you're playing into that space is very, very good for the energy transition motion.
Absolutely.
What emerging trends are you seeing in the industry as a whole, and are you using AI through your own operations, or it's kind of you're working for it, but are you using it at all?
I think AI has become a term that's been thrown around, which is in some regards just computer control. Like obviously we have a control system in our process and in our project. The stage 1 facility is using, a control system, but we're not leveraging AI at the moment. And there's a few reasons around that. One is that we want to protect the IP, which sounds silly, but we need to be thinking and understand it before we just go headfirst into it. Because then all of a sudden this thing knows about what we're doing and we don't want
tell
to
anyone.
So there's a little bit to think about around that.
Love it here.
And so I think from that point of view, it's very much, we're not too engaged in the deployment of that type of technology for us at the moment.
So pricing and costs are really important when you're looking at the development of any products in the industry right now. Mm-hmm. How are you controlling costs to ensure you get margin appreciation in the long term and revenue generation as well?
Well, the DFS that we put out in May of 2024 has pretty strong margins. Yep. So we're talking in US dollar terms, $6 to $7 cost per ton versus $25 sale price nominally. Mm-hmm. And so we obviously have some scope there, but in terms of keeping costs down, a lot of our variable cost is naturally hedged in our reagent cost. Yeah. Our feedstock is a very small portion of what our costs are. And so we're able to sort of keep a pretty tight lid on costs. Obviously, we can't do a lot about labour. That is what it is. And energy costs is the other key piece. Yeah. But those areas are the sort of more the fixed element, but the variable costs and so on is pretty tight. So.
And what does the second half of 2025 look like for Alpha HPA?
A couple of key catalysts for us would be, further LOI coming into the market, particularly around the semiconductor space, but also the EV battery anode OEM sort of space. Yeah. We've got an existing LOI that's already in place that's been indicated that will be increased, and so there's some re-rating that's happening. And that's actually quite interesting to see a counterparty that's in the semiconductor space that initially said, "Oh, we need this much." Now we want, which I think we announced in January was 100 tons. Mm-hmm. Now they're saying, well, actually it's going to be more than that. Let us get back to you. So that market, as I say, is exploding, and we still haven't got all the LOIs in. We're working with other very large sort of serious businesses in this space that have got the product in their hand, and they're obviously doing their assessments and going through that qualification process. So we fully expect to convert those during the course of the year as well.
Rob, thank you so much for your time today. And what a good time to be in Alpha HPA right now. Absolutely. And a good time to think about the industry and compelling investment ideas. I hope you enjoyed that episode of From the Helm with Alpha HPA, Rob Williamson. I'm Grady Wulff, and we see you for the next episode.